All right, a very good morning to you, and thank you so much for keeping it NBS Television. It's a Thursday, and as you know well, our conversations on Thursday rotate around the economy, and today we'll be looking at the export dream for Uganda. Not just a dream, but there's been a lot of policy that has come through, of course, for import substitution and export promotion. And with me in studio is Dr. Ezra Muhumuza, who is the Executive Director of the Uganda Manufacturers Association, as we get to look at the portfolio of Uganda, which is more than 80% agricultural exports. How do we get to turn around that, not to say that it's not good, but how do we get to enhance it much better, but also just be able to increase our portfolio of the countries that we do export to, because a greater percentage of our export partners are actually our neighbors, to talk about Sudan, Kenya, and many other areas, also including a few other countries away from there, looking at the United Arab Emirates and Germany. South Africa is very close to us in the region of Africa as well. Dr. Ezra, it's a pleasure having you. Good morning.
Good morning, Mildred.
Yes.
Always a pleasure to be with you.
A pleasure having a conversation that is that will definitely turn around the statistics of the country. But let's first of all look at your team, the Uganda Manufacturers Association. When you get to look at the portfolio of manufacturing, how does it look like? The products manufactured by your members?
Thank you. The products that are manufactured by our members fall into three categories.
Okay.
There are manufacturers who are doing first level processing that produce raw materials for other ministries, for other industries that we call the primary industries. Then we have got the secondary industries that produce goods that are directly for use using basic technology, like the way you'd say most of the utensils at home, making of these plates, making of the jerrycans we use. These are basic materials. Then we have got the third category, which is high-tech industries that manufacture high-tech products. Talk of phones, TVs, automobiles. So we are into those three categories. So basically, we have been majorly concentrated on the basic industries because they produce to fill on the necessities. And they normally uptake raw materials from primary industries. So the traffic or the trend that we have been seeing for the last 3 decades is basically rotating around primary industries and basic industries. Right now, in this new decade, we are seeing a proliferation of high-tech industries coming up into this economy. Say, starting 2018, 2017, now, the new trend of investment is moving towards high-tech, with government of Uganda in the lead through the Chila automobile industry. And we've got so many that now are coming up, manufacturing televisions in this country. Yeah. We are manufacturing phones. We are manufacturing all the electronics. We are doing transformers. We are doing the cable networks.
Many have always asked whether it's the manufacturing or the assembling bit of it. You know, separation of these processes is very difficult when you want to use the kind of divide. It's like when you say you want to separate a mother from a child. It's very difficult, very difficult. What I'm trying to say is that industries undergo a certain metamorphic process. And most of them start as assembling. Actually, all the industries are assembling units. So it doesn't matter because you'll never have an industry that produces everything. No, it is very difficult. It is like when you say you go into a garden and then you eat from there. No. If you are going to eat a buffet, it is normally an aggregation of so many ingredients that come from different sources. So are the industries. They outsource raw materials from different sources, bring them together to make a product.
So I hear that narrative out there, which is a weak argument, that these ones are for assembling. Hey, assembling what? Different raw materials, bringing them together to make a product. So that is what it is. Yes, we may not be there 100% yet, that domestically we are producing everything in one center, because that is the idealistic situation. But we are moving towards that kind of target.
Okay. Looking at your manufacturers, what we are manufacturing, because at the end of it all, away from the domestic consumption, it also takes us into the export market. Let's look at the portfolio based on which particular section, because we know well that Uganda is an agro-based country, and there's been a lot of conversations and discussions with regard to agro-industrialization, even in the promotion of value addition. What's the percentage of the agro-based industries vis-a-vis any others?
When you talk about the percentage, the industries differ in terms of size. You can have one industry, for instance, one industry in steel sector can be equated to 1,000 industries in agro processing.
Okay.
So in terms of numbers, this country, because of the processing, we are seeing increasing trend in terms of the numbers. Because in every enterprise, we are now starting to do value addition. So in terms of numbers, agro-based industries are still the highest. But in terms of the capacity, which capacity is also dependent on the processes and the technology that is required. Steel sector are high, followed by the sugar sector. Sugar sector, you'd want it to be under agro-processing, but in our nomenclature, we want to look at it as sugar sector because it has its own section of trickle-down industries or chain industries that come from that sector. So in terms of the percentage, we are moving. In the last 10 years, there was a growing trend for agro-based industries. But right now, we are augmenting it with high-tech industries. So the upcoming industries are more in high-tech now than agro-business.
Also, you see a switch right now. Okay.
Yes. But again, under agro-processing, there is now a new dynamism that is coming up, which is about to now centralization, many processors coming around one big processor as suppliers. For instance, we are now into export of maize that is processed. Factories like the one of Maganjo, factories like the one of Mandera. Now they aggregate what other small producers are now doing. They are not doing so much of milling. Now these other small ones do the milling. Now these ones are doing fortification, preservation, and packaging. Now that is a new dynamism that is coming up to see aggregation and synchronization of some of these industries to build into one sector.
Okay. Let's talk about the export market, because I know that during COVID-19, government did adopt the import substitution and export promotion strategy. Well, because we got to ask ourselves, what are many of these products that we're spending much money on, selling Ugandan jobs, like the president said, and selling out our revenue, as opposed to bringing in much more of the revenue that is supposed to be coming through? What are we currently exporting out of your members, and in what categories are we looking at?
Currently in our region.
Especially value added, because the president has always talked against the raw material export.
Yes. When industries grow domestically or locally, there are two things that happen. Number one, the loss of raw materials reduces. Two, the importation of products reduces. So currently, we are seeing an increasing trend of materials processed domestically. First of all, what we celebrate is that we have started to do iron ore smelting. Now we've reduced on the import bill for steel, raw materials for steel industries. So that one is what we have celebrated, that we have one of our companies that has started to do domestic iron ore processing. And we are anticipating in the next 2 years, we're having other 3 coming on board. So on this, we are very comfortable that in the next 5 years, we shall have dropped the import bill for steel materials, for iron ore by more than half. That one we are on very good trajectory. The second achievement that has been registered is in the sugar sector. We've been importing industrial sugar. Right now, we have 3 factories that have come up. They are now doing industrial sugar. So the import bill for industrial sugar, we are very sure in the next 2 to 3 years will be coming almost to zero.
Maybe our viewer would like you to break it down when you talk about industrial sugar.
Yes.
I know the president has always referred to that which will be used in making syrups and what, but let's break it down for them. What do you mean as industrial sugar? Because when you talk about sugar, we're thinking about the crystals after all.
Yes. Maybe to the layman, I can say, when we do sugar, for consumption, we do an extra processing component that makes it a little bit smaller crystals and white sugar compared to the brown sugar for direct consumption. So it is one extra stage of processing that makes it now industrial sugar, so that it can easily dissolve in all sorts of mixtures that are happening in all these other industries that uptake industrial sugar. For instance, beverages. When you look into a bottle of soda, you shouldn't be seeing any small particle in there, and that is the crystallization that is done to ensure that it is purely dissolvable, dissolvable in any mixture. So that's the extra component that is done. It might look simple in explanation, but in terms of investment, it is always an extra cost, and that's why you would say, you would pose a question: for all this long, why haven't we been able to do industrial sugar? But it's a step that we did. We thank government with the policy that really is supporting the upcoming of this industrial sugar, and we thank the uptakers of the industrial sugar. They are now resorting to domestic purchases of this industrial sugar. So those are 2 major steps that have been made in the sector in respect to import substitution since the COVID period. Okay,
let's look at the areas where we're exporting this, because that's a very important aspect. It's one thing to promote industrialization in the country. It's another thing to have the avenue where we're going to be able to export. Currently, as the Uganda Manufacturers Association, which are the destinations for the products that are not consumed domestically?
We don't only export what we don't consume domestically. No. For us, we look at the market as the same.
Whether domestic or
foreign. Our interest is to ensure that we have products that are standard enough to compete in local market, regional market, and global market. Now, and when we are doing the sales, we don't exclude and say, this is a domestic price, this is a regional price. No, competition doesn't allow us, because to us, we look at the region as one economy, so you cannot produce for half an economy. So what we are looking at currently, where our strategy is is on the regional market. But we have got a challenge that this market is a homogeneous market. What we produce and consume is almost what Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Ethiopia are also producing, because we are in the same bracket of industrial development. What we are trying to do is to look at where each of these countries can have comparative advantage. For instance, Uganda, we can compete favorably on iron ore deposits. Sorry, Tanzania can compete favorably on coal deposits. So currently we are importing coal from Tanzania, and we are exporting iron ore to some countries, including Kenya. So the products that we are basically hinging on for the regional market, as a country, we are looking at textiles, we are looking at food and beverages, we are looking at construction materials, because our cement is ahead of most of the deposits in the region. We are majorly looking at automobiles, including motor vehicles. Our strategic plan as a country is to export around, we are looking at 2,500 units of automobiles per year to be produced and sent into the region.
But do we have the capacity as well?
Yes, the capacity to produce automobiles, we have it. Automobiles is about two things. It's about to mechatronics, which is about now the electrical engineering, and it is about the body that makes these things. When you look at a motorcycle, for instance, we are manufacturing them in Karamojo of all places. Now, it's about the plastic, it's about the metal, which we have here as steel, it's about the wiring of these components. And we are saying, no, we are not going to say we want to do everything. What we can import as a spare part, we will import until when we develop that capacity. But we are saying, let's begin. We have started. We are now selling out of this country buses that are manufactured from here. Yes, we import the engine, but the rest we do it from here, and there is value addition. So what we are trying to say is that we need to increase our comparative advantage for the region, and we increase stability in the region, and we find where we can become masters of the supply. So those are the strategic areas that we are focusing on. We want to be the producers of cotton and garments, so that we become the chief exporters of textiles in the region. We want to be the leading exporters or manufacturers in the region for beverages, because we have the potential to make alcohol, for instance, for the entire of Africa, because we have a comparative advantage on production of maize, cassava, and sorghum. So if we work out in masses, in big numbers, on those three, we have the capacity to produce alcohol for the entire continent.
Let's look at the organization, because that is a chain. It's one thing for Mildred to have half an acre of land, I'll plant maize, another. Let's look at the organization over the comparative advantage. First of all, by the way, starting with, how do we get to an introspection of accepting that this is where our comparative advantage is, whether it's in the production cost or whether it is in the mass production? Because one thing that always comes through every time we're talking about exports and regional markets is the aspect of homogeneity of products. If you're talking about the African Continental Free Trade Area, does Uganda produce more cocoa than Ghana or something like that? It could be the third best producing country, but is that our best product that we can be able to do? How do we get to sit around where we have comparative advantage, and what would be our gauging points? And also, how then do we organize across the value chains?
Yes, the bigger part of the comparative advantage comes from the fact that Uganda unlike most of these countries, we have 2 seasons of agricultural production. Number 2, some of these products that we are talking about are traditional products in terms of enterprises for agriculture. These products, we do not need technology, we don't need skills from the mass. We don't have to depend on a donor for someone to learn how to do sorghum.
Technological transfer.
No, we are saying on some of these enterprises, we are there. There is nothing new we need to bring in terms of technical know-how. But what we are engaging government on is to see what brings us down most of the time are numbers. The principle for business, as I've always said, is that business is in numbers. So
yes,
is how do we interest the commercial producers to get into the sector and produce these enterprises in big numbers, is where now we are concentrating on to push the Ministry of Agriculture, to push government and say, for us as industrialists, we are ready to uptake this. There is always a complaint that there is no market. The market is assured, the industries are here, just supply us with the raw materials, we do the processing, we give to exporters to export. So that is now where the narrative has reached, but the good thing is that through the new approach of government of ATMs, you must be aware of
agriculture,
this,
technology, and
manufacturing, tourism. It's agriculture, tourism, manufacturing, and services to ensure that, because what it is helping us is to focus. Other than being everywhere, they are saying, let's first focus on this. We have had deep engagements with them to say that we focus and say, let the financing that there is be channeled into productive sectors of the enterprises that we are ready to uptake, so that now there is a product that is coming onto the market immediately. For instance, what I was trying to say, to get sorghum and turn it into a beverage, that does not require someone to have gotten a PhD in chemistry from a certain university elsewhere, like we see other things trying to complicate the economy. So that is the kind of simplistic approach that we are bringing in to ensure that we increase our exports. Because our challenge is if we don't take advantage of the growing market out there, the imperialists, as in a foreign force, will of course look at it and eventually grab it. And before you know it, we'll be saying, oh, we advocated for regional markets, but we are not taking advantage of them. So that's the engagement and the strategy that we are trying to engage.
And that's where I was looking at the backward linkage of the production in itself, the provision of the raw materials themselves. How are you as well coming through as Uganda Manufacturers Association to the back end now, to the people who are going to be able to provide you with these raw materials? Because, for example, government will introduce PDM, but how many people are going to be able, how much have we amassed people to come into a particular value chain? We've always had this when it was vanilla. Everyone went into vanilla growing. You go to moringa, everyone is going. Quails, everyone is going. But how sustainable are some of these value chains that we actually get to promote? And how do you as well come in as Uganda Manufacturers Association? Because you're the recipients of these products.
That is the engagement we're having with the government. The president has challenged us several times. Says, I have sent in an inducement, calls it an inducement, to induce productivity. If productivity comes, you people have always said you don't have raw materials. The other people have always told me they don't have the market. So can you work together? So the engagement we have right now is to ensure that whatever is produced is uptaken by the first level processors. So right now, the engagement, that's why you see, we engaged the government on electricity, say they had suspended the rural electrification. We said, no, take back electricity, ensure there is electricity everywhere. They have allowed importation of some of these first level processing units that in form of machinery. They are supporting the local manufacturers of these machineries in Katwe, such that there is processing which reduces the bulk and being able to rot so quickly, the perishability of some of these materials or outputs of agriculture right away from the centers of production.
Okay.
We want first level processing units to be there. So if electricity comes to every village, we'll be sure that the processor will be there, and this processor will be linked to a big manufacturer that will uptake all these products, and then we'll be able to export. So it's the strategy. It might look very simple, but it's not, because it involves some policy shifts, it involves some investments, and but we have a feeling it's going to work.
Okay. Especially if you put in the energy, definitely it will be able to work. Dr. Ezra, let's take a very short commercial break, and when we do return, we'll of course continue to look at our conversation about our export portfolio and how we make it a little bit better, and most of it is to how to create the trade balance between the imports and the exports. Let's get back. One key aspect, if we're going to talk about manufacturing, industrialization, is the aspect of electricity. The president has continuously talked about having to reduce the cost to 5 cents per kilowatt hour. Has that been achieved? Are your members happy with the cost of electricity? Because that also gets back to now the pricing of the final commodity.
It does affect, it's a cost of production. It's a function of cost of production, electricity. We have had intensive engagement with government, and we always have this in energy dialogues. We have been able to understand why the price is where it is right now, and again to be able to understand where the price is going for the future. Currently, the cost of power is tagged to the pricing or the concession that was signed somewhere like 10 years ago, when the country was disparate about power stabilization. So some of these concessions are still ongoing. So government is telling us that once some of these concessions have ended, because you look at this sector not just in the spotlight, we look at it retrospectively, where we are coming from as a sector and where we are going. So the explanation that government is giving is that once these concessions have ended, because our energy security is increasing, the price is going to be coming down, because we are seeing so many IPPs coming up, the independent power producers are bringing power to the grid. We have seen construction of more dams to increase the power supply. By then, when these concessions were signed, the power supply was not as adequate as it is now. And it was not as adequate as it will be going forward in the future. So the cost of generating power, transmitting power, and distributing power is still high as of now. But this cost continues to go down as the energy supply sector evolves and improves on their performance. And
actually, this is where, Dr. Ezra, thank God you talked about the IPPs. We've seen some other industries that have actually been able to, out of their waste, quote unquote, what would be, you know, unused or unwanted material, they get to actually produce electricity that can be used for many other functions across the value chain. Is this a kind of you know, direction we would like to take? Because I want to believe in our industrial parks, the kind of waste that is produced can actually be turned into something much more useful.
Precisely, and that's what we're saying, that manufacturers right now are producing, most of them are producing their own energy.
Okay.
you talk of sugar sector. The waste from sugar is used to generate power. And one of the sources of power you see here on the grid is from those industries. Then we have other industries which are also coming up. A month ago, we launched our green industry agenda. These are components in the green industry agenda to ensure that we maintain zero waste and we produce energy, but clean energy.
Sure.
That is one source of going positive. But the kind of demand, energy demand that we have, I want to assure you, however, whatever the progress we make in creation of green energy, we still dependent on hydroelectricity. We are still going to depend on power that is generated by hydro, which is about a construction of dams. So we are trying to tell government, we don't need to be complacent and think that because there is a lot of the proliferation for technology for green energy is coming up, we still have to believe that industrial energy will continue to come from hydro. And we don't want to stop the conversation with government. We have had this conversation with NGOs. They think,
we have plenty of sun.
We have plenty of sun, we can do solar. For domestic use, thank you, that will apply.
Yes,
but for industrial power, this is not applicable in the immediate term. And that is why we are engaging government and say, look, our counterparts, the region is ready to uptake this electricity as an export. By the way, we are talking about priority exports for Uganda. One of them is energy. That's where we have comparative advantage, because most of our neighbors do not have this kind of fast-flowing rivers to be able to do hydropower. So it's one source of export revenue that we are looking at, and the market is shaping up, and we think it's the right trend. But still, before we think of how we export power, how we do what, our priority should be how we localize industries to ensure that every area has a processor that rhymes with the enterprise they produce. That's now when we will be able to make industries relevant to most of the citizens in this country.
Dr. Ezra, as we've definitely discussed, production is a value chain, and every player is very important at that, lest the chain is actually broken. And I was looking at the example that you did give, for example, flour. You know, there are other smaller, manufacturers that are going to do the flour, and then the others will probably uptake and do the fortification. But I'm looking at the value chain of the grain production. We've had issues with our neighbors in Kenya over aflatoxin percentages in our grain and the toxicity that exists there. And it all goes to handling. It all goes to, if we don't have better ways of drying and we all have to wait for the sun, what does get to happen? What are you doing about those backward-forward linkages in the production value chain for the materials that are required?
The biggest challenge here is about who is handling. There are two ways of doing it. One is to ensure that we reach out to every producer and they understand the role they have in the value chain and the importance of maintaining standards and the quality of what they produce. Then the second approach would be, don't overburden these small farmers. Let them produce, buy from them immediately. Let's have receipt systems that now manages the second level handling, including the storage, including the drying, and then including the first level processing. The challenge is that the way our economy is structured, especially our agriculture sector, is that the producers, the main producers, are still the peasants. So to me, my mother started producing the way she found her mother producing. It will take you time to transit her into exactly what you want. Because for her, she has never thought of producing for a market in Congo. Her job has always been to produce for her sons and daughters. Now, when she sells to you the surplus, don't overburden her. That is the argument. That now she should be an expert of food handling. We are saying revamp the receipt system. And this is where I have had issues with government planning. The receipt systems are still lacking. 10 years ago, the government rallied us. I said, we have started a receipt systems authority. It's going to ensure that there are stores, there are drying yards, there are logistical components that will facilitate the uptake, the evacuation of what is produced in the villages. But it's not coming. And that is where we are getting a challenge. Yeah. So by the time our processors come to get to these products, to buy them, they are already faulting on some of the parameters. So that is where we are saying PDM, rural transformation, is pegged, the success of rural transformation, the success of PDM is pegged on how quickly we shall establish receipt systems and make them work.
And what is going to be your input as the association itself, apart from the calls and the push? Sometimes you need some physical action for things to be done because then it affects you directly.
We are saying there is financing for this. If government has failed or has not prioritized this, relinquish. Put this fund somewhere, let the private people pick it through borrowing. They go and establish these warehouse receipt systems. Then you just do the regulation. But operation, implementation of this whole scheme, let it be done by the private sector.
Okay.
Because for them, they can easily create those linkages.
All right. Well, Dr. Ezra, our time is far spent, but what do you think are some of the policy shifts and changes that need to be done if our export promotion dream will actually be brought to fruition fully as we would like to see it?
Let me begin with the policy intentions. Before we think of any policy, we must understand that for any export strategy to work, there must be a producer domestically who produces cheaply and produces in numbers.
And the quality.
That is the bottom line. And quality. 3 parameters. Once we have those ones right, so what would it imply? That we must have policies that will ensure attainment of those 3 objectives. Production of numbers, production of low cost, production of high quality. Then the other export strategy or the export enhancement policies begin from there. Now what we are getting wrong is to sit and say we are coming up with an export strategy, we will export this, very idealistic. But the constraints that stop production of these products for export are not given a priority. So the policy shift I would argue for is concentrate on the policies that ensure production, have the product that is competitive, then you can take it. But you see government prioritizing policies on export, they are prioritizing how they are going to open markets out there, how they are getting farms to go and advertise out there, but they are not prioritizing the basics, which is about how does a commodity leave first household to the first farm, from first farm to the second farm, from second farm to an exporting farm. That is now the chain where we are calling for a policy reversal. Reversal in the sense that go back a step behind, address certain policies that you have sort of not prioritized, and then you can be able to get a product to export.
Dr. Ezra, let's look at some of those constraints in a nutshell that your members, the manufacturers, have actually talked about, and probably they haven't been addressed at the speed or manner in which they are actually being demanded for.
For instance, we are talking about the investment policy. Why do you think it is important that a foreign investor should come in the country and be allocated land in an industrial park because he is going to do, let's say, manufacturing of TVs? That one is okay. But when I am saying there is a manufacturer who is ready to set up a plant at the district to process coffee, and that one is not given ample attention, is not given any incentive, how do you expect him to arise? The other one you expected to arise by giving certain incentives. But this local person, what are those incentives you are putting to the local? Because the industry we are talking about is not only an industry in a national park, in terms of industrial park, but an industry that adds value. So we are saying, if you are sending PDM money to produce, to increase production of these enterprises, at the very parish you are telling us, I'll gazette some land and say industrialists come and occupy this land and or uptake these things. But now how do you want us to do that? You expect us to send lorries to pick these enterprises, these products, and bring them to Namamve. It's very costly. It's very costly. That was saying, gazette equally what will be for a local manufacturer as an investor.
Well, government will say they've put up these industrial parks in all the regions, across the regions of the country. Is it about the location of the industrial
Here
parks?
we are talking about first level processing industry.
Okay.
Let's not look at the national level
before
we go to this. So the way the economy is built is you start from the household and you move to the macroeconomics. Here we are trying to say, can we have a processing unit that will serve the 20 farmers in that area? What's wrong with you gazetting at a Gomborora level some land? What is happening down there is that the land that was preserved for Gombororas, that was preserved for parishes, these councillors just go one day, wake up here at a bar and demarcate, and they distribute these lands to themselves. We are saying, why can't the incentive for industrialization be taken up to that level? What's wrong? Land is there. All we need is a policy. So they say, let's have a policy shift a little back to accommodate an investor from the local perspective, from the micro perspective.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Ezra. And I know the conversation does continue because this is the policy direction for the government on export promotion, and your members are definitely contributing to that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's all we had time for, but we can continue with the conversation on our social media platforms at NBS TV on Twitter, NBS Television on NBS TV on X. Yeah, it's no longer Twitter, at NBS Television on Facebook and Next Media Services. I am Mildred Tohaise, and good morning. God bless you.